Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to House of Footy. It's your boy Ray, and tonight I've got a full house with me. Welcome tonight, Mac
Good evening.
and Gio.
What is good, guys?
On today's podcast, we're going to be going over all of the key Champions League outcomes that happened over the last 2 days. And of course, we're going to do a quick little preview on what's to come this weekend in the Premier League. Before we get into it, don't forget to follow us on our social media, both on X and Instagram. Our handle is at house_of_footy. Also, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to us. We are on both Spotify and YouTube. And lastly, feel free to get in touch with us via email. We love hearing from you guys and want you guys getting involved. Our email is houseoffooty@hotmail.com. All right, so let's get straight into it. Actually, these couple games that we're going to talk about, looking back at it, have a lot more history riding in it than I thought. But we're going to start off with, of course, Real Madrid versus Dortmund. Gio, these two teams faced off in the Champions League final last season. And it looked like, at least the very first half, it was going to be a switch of what the result was last summer with Dortmund leading 2-0 at halftime. But
Yeah.
with Real Madrid, you can't really count them out in the Champions League. And so give us your takes on their 5-2 win eventually this past Tuesday.
Yeah, no, I think definitely these are two teams that I personally love watching. As you guys know, as the listeners know, I do ride heavy on, for Dortmund, especially because I consider an underdog team, especially in a competition like this. No, it looked like it was the perfect revenge game, albeit not a final. They played well. They played well. They played very open, very free. Um, you know, I thought, their runs in behind each other, their overlap play was very good as well. And we thought they were gonna add to it. They're gonna control most of the game. Go into the second half, maybe, add another, maybe Real adds one, potentially it at ending 3-1, but you give an inch to a team like Real Madrid, it's it's tough. It's tough because they know how to win in tough situations. And again, this unknowingly has been coined the Real Madrid competition because they can't. It's where they thrive, and as soon as we start counting them out, is when they start coming back. And I know in the chat, Ray was the first to comment about the 2-0 lead. And then a couple of Real Madrid fans were quick to storm back as soon as the second goal went in. And then from there, momentum's a very real thing in sports. And, Vinny was fantastic. Obviously not a goal scorer, but Rodrigo was a huge piece of that comeback as well. His his control on the ball, his efforts off the ball, to keep balls alive, I think were definitely the driving force of it all. And even defenders chipping in for goals. I know Mac loves seeing that too. But no, all in all, fantastic game if you're a fan of football because there was a lot of goals in it and quite the epic comeback as well.
Yeah, I'm glad that you've already mentioned Rodrigo because, of course, all the credit and all the eyes are going to be on Vinicius's hat trick. On the flip side, Lucas Vasquez did get a very important goal, but the two Dortmund goals, I have to single out the probably the weakest part of the Real Madrid team in the left back position. Mendy was horrible in both goals, so I have to just quickly point that out. But yeah, you got to give Real Madrid credit with the just the drive to have all those chances very early on and really not letting off even after they got the lead. Uh, Probably the most dangerous team on the counterattack with Vinicius, Rodrigo, and Mbappe, who didn't even have much to do in this game. If you're a team that's going to come to Madrid, or even any team that does face Madrid, home or away, a if you are facing a deficit against this team, it's going to be tough to sort of put on pressure while they got that counterattack in their back pocket. Mac, what are your thoughts?
Uh, I think overall this game shows the strengths and weaknesses of what a kind of a Galacticos, a Real Madrid team can be. Where I do think defensively they have a lot more holes than ever in comparison to the last couple of years, where we see very much a defensive structure, right? Where you have players like Carvajal, Nacho being able to put a shift in across the back line and still have some solidity back there, in conjunction with having a protection of a Tony Cruz or a Modric on their day when they're playing at their best. Whereas now it really seems like it's all or nothing in a lot of ways, because I wouldn't just argue with Mendy. Vasquez as well, for me, was very poor on the right hand side, losing track of a couple of runners quite consistently. So for me, I think defensively, more so than ever with Real Madrid, they are kind of a question mark. They're a cause of concern. Where I think the biggest moment of the match was when the game was at 2-2, and Dortmund had a chance to take the lead. It was a 3-on-1, I think it was, misplaced a pass. And of course, Real Madrid go on to be able to win the game. And a Real Madrid team of, let's say, 2-3 years ago, there isn't that opportunity because they're able to snuff it out, have a stranglehold of the game, and not allow the opposition to cut them through like butter. But on the other side, you want to give them credit because they're a team that, in a span of 30 minutes, were able to bag away 5 goals and felt like they could have kept scoring and scored more in that time span. So it's going to be very interesting where you see the kind of the polarization of the highs and lows of this Real Madrid team. And because just as well it worked in the second half, it didn't work in the first half. So I'm very interested to see long term how this plays out, and a game that we're going to be touching on shortly with Barcelona versus Real Madrid in the El Clásico, because both teams, I would argue, are playing at their best in a lot of ways, but it'll be very interesting to see which team is actually the best in the moment, even though I think a lot of people would associate it with the Real Madrid team considering the stars they have in lineup. But I would argue they have more weaknesses now than over the last couple of years. So great credit, but it's tough to, and you want to celebrate the fact that you did have a comeback of this manner, but there are worrying signs. The fact that you were down 2-0 could have easily lost the game on a couple of different occasions as well. It does leave me worried there. On the other side, when you're looking at Dortmund in terms of the changes they made in their squad over the summer, they had a lot of outgoings, a lot of incomings where their center back pairing, Sule, Schlotterbeck, had a decent enough game in them their positions, but the wide backs for them as well were the trouble spot, where consistently you saw Vinicius, Rodrigo, or Mbappe kind of toying them with them individually one-on-one. And when there ever was a moment that they weren't doubled or triple teamed up, they were getting cut through. So I think I want to be able to make sure, in terms of, you want to credit Real Madrid for the fact that they did have a comeback, but you want to kind of keep, at the same time, raise your eyebrow a little bit, that considering that they're in that position and playing with a team like Dortmund, who thus far in the Champions League, you think they were ranked first in the table going into this game. I still think that if you look at that lineup across most of the teams, you would anticipate them to lose most Champions League games given the quality that they do have, right? So I don't want to give it. I want to give Real Madrid, like they say, they deserve to get their flowers in some way, given a performance. I want to give them like 2 flowers, but then take one of them away. That's how so more I feel about that performance.
I do want to quickly, before we move on to the next game, Gio, put you in a tough position in a sense here, in that, of course, Kylian Mbappe, this is his first season at Real Madrid. We can all kind of agree he hasn't hit the heights that he himself would have expected for himself. But of course, it's his first season. On the flip side, Vinicius, hat trick, getting all the plaudits, of course, winning the Champions League, and actually, just looking it up now, is 2 years younger than his teammate. And in a year that a lot of people are going to be talking about who will win the Ballon d'Or, should there be any concern about any team chemistry there, or is Vinny's time now, but eventually it's going to be, of course, Mbappe's team to take over? What are your thoughts there?
Yeah, no, I absolutely think so. But I mean, obviously it's great to have, a star of that stature on the roster, but sorry. I just think he came in at the wrong time. He really shouldn't have signed, in terms of, you know, playing his best position. Centrally, he just doesn't thrive as much. He beats a lot of players on speed, and in a tighter area centrally, it's very hard to do so, unless you're getting, pristine passes from a Luka Modric, Tony Cruz. You are sometimes, but again, we have to be real with ourselves in the sense that these players are beyond past their prime. Yes, they are better than most players their age, but they are past their prime. So who's to say Real Madrid can't find that next midfielder coming up? But I don't think it's anytime soon. And in the meantime, while he has to play centrally, and Vinny is on the left side, which they both prefer, Vinny's gonna get all that attention because like these games show, that's where they're gonna exploit their opposition. And if Mbappe doesn't get a go, obviously Vinny's gonna take advantage of that.
Exactly, exactly.
I want to jump in on that point because the interesting aspect for me of how the structure works out is where can they find their Firmino? Where, as an example, we used the Liverpool as a comparison. If you had the situation where you had Salah, Mane, and let's just say you could duplicate Mane and you put him in the front three as well, that team doesn't work. You need to have in a front three someone that's willing to sacrifice to be able to play make to allow, let's say, attacking wingers to be able to shine. And of that front three, Mbappe's playing centrally, so he's kind of asked to do that role. But they all, Rodrigo and Vinicius, all ideally, I think, if you ask them, what's your favorite position to play? Left winger. So they all want to kind of field around and jump around into that one position. So are they all great individual players? Yes. Do you rank one highly, a little bit more highly than the other based off previous experiences, results, their ability to score goals? Yeah, sure. But can they fit together and actually be a cohesive unit and build that correct chemistry? That remains to be seen because as of right now, thus far since the beginning of the season, I would argue only one of them has played up to their potential. Each of the three of them have had good moments, but only one of them are kind of flying all cylinders. Whereas you see, as a direct comparison, and it's not a team we'll talk about shortly, with Barcelona, how Rafinha, Lamine Yamal, Lewandowski are all able to kind of mesh and cohese together, where maybe even if you were to kind of do a draft of who would you want on your team today as individual players, you probably take all three of them in terms of Rafinha, Lamine Yamal, and Lewandowski after the three Real Madrid players many people may do. So it's not necessarily they have the individual quality, but can they all succeed at the exact same time? And that's what I'm looking for. Is this kind of the long-term plan just to have big names, or is it more, which has definitely been Real Madrid's kind of history, or is it to actually build a cohesive, functioning team that has a better chance of winning?
Okay, and I'm glad that you've already touched on Rafinha because that's from one outstanding performance from one Brazilian winger to another one. Actually, both in Spain. For sure, the other headline that kind of grabs everyone's attention this week, Mac, is Barcelona 4, Bayern Munich 1. And I gotta be honest with you guys. I also thought Bayern was gonna be a more of a presence in this game in that they were going to get the win. Barcelona was going to get found out with their. I still stand by the fact that I think their defense is not proven, but I was definitely proven wrong, Mac, by the fact that Rafinha balled out in this game. Lamine Yamal continues to impress, and on the flip side, Bayern's defense, I think out of the two in Upamecano and Min Jae Kim, any of us three can kind of replace them in those positions and maybe do a better shift. But Mac, what are your thoughts in this game overall?
I appreciate you saying that. That's a complete lie. Maybe you two, definitely not me. With this Barcelona team, I think they are kind of an underrated story considering how well they have played. Of course, 13 games they've scored. I think it's 43 goals, and they've conceded only 13 goals themselves. So they're only conceding a goal a game and scoring a bundle of them. And it's not as if where you would see previous years where it's all just through, let's say, Lewandowski. He does have 15 of them, but they have shared it along across the broad with Lamine scoring 5, Rafinha with 9, Pedri was scoring a handful of goals as well. And I think the bigger part for me is where you finally now have a position across like that midfield of like Pedri, Casado, players that are able to like step in and play functioning, structured, great minutes. And quality minutes where you've seen, let's say under previous years, where you have Gavi or Pedri not playing at their best, right? Because they've had previous years where they played 60, 70 games or there's injuries that caught up to them. Now their midfield is kind of like a well-oiled machine under Hansi Flick to allow a Rafinha, a Lamine Yamal to kind of move further up the pitch, give them easier access. I think I think it was Rafinha's goal when he got a through ball through Lamine Yamal, and everyone was talking about that ball from Lamine Yamal initially. For me, it was the ball coming out from Pedri to allow that opportunity to come, and that's what for me stands out and separates this team from where they were under previous seasons to this season, where that midfield, as long as it's cohesive, it's working on the same page, everyone understands and is able to succeed in their role. It's allowed their offensive players now to finally flourish and get into that final third with better opportunities, which all we know Lewandowski can score. We know Rafinha one-on-one can terrorize people, and same with Lamine Yamal. So for me, that's where it starts. And this performance was definitely emblematic of their season so far. And it sets up an enthralling game against Real Madrid, where going into the season and based off previous years, there's one clear team. It almost comes to the point of the last couple of years where La Liga had felt a little bit like the Bundesliga, where there is clearly one best team. And it's great to see that Barcelona are kind of returning to their previous years and being alongside them. And now, of course, are first in the table. And it sets up a fascinating game. So very excited to see what happens. Love to see how well Barcelona are playing. And I think it's a credit from Hansi Flick, how he's able to kind of administer and control the midfield to allow his offensive stars to show out.
Yeah, and so I have to touch on, of course, the history from this match. Gio, Robert Lewandowski, of course, former Bayern Munich player, scoring against his former team. Um, I think this one was I think the first time Barcelona beat Bayern Munich in the Champions League, and I think like 9 years or something like that. Crazy, crazy stat, considering, of course, the biggest result. Oh, the most notable result recently was the 8-2 demolition that Bayern inflicted on Barca. And that was, of course, through the hands of Hansi Flick, who's now managing this Barcelona team. So just fantastic storylines all around. But like you said, Joe, you had a lot of you have an affinity for Borussia Dortmund when you watch them in the Champions League. I guess can similar be said, or are you then you have a good feeling seeing Bayern, their direct rivals, kind of falter in the Champions League while Dortmund does well? What were your overall reactions to this game?
I mean, look, Barca. I think people are gonna ask, how come Xavi couldn't do this with this group of guys? I think it comes down to people management. I think Hansi Flick has been there, done that. He's been on the biggest stages as a coach as opposed to a player, and I think he's able to handle a locker room much better than Xavi. So I think we often just try to live in nostalgia where Xavi was a Barcelona academy kid, came through, became a you know a forever legend for that club, and then obviously hope to be successful as the manager, but obviously not the case. We're not that successful, or rather, but hopefully he gets another shot somewhere else. Um, but the thing is, do I find joy seeing Bayern suffer a little? Yes and no. I do love watching competitive football, but I think it's catching up with them, and by catching up with them, I think it goes to you know their little formula where they kind of pick and choose and scrape away from all these German clubs to sign the best of the group crop and kind of make them the best team. And that's how they're always going to be compared or be considered as a farmers league is because they do acts like that. So I think they don't have sort of that drive or the sell, the pitch of the project anymore to sell these dreams to these younger German players anymore because they haven't been successful for whatever reason. Maybe poor signing choices. I think it all started with the Sadio Mane, and it's kind of gone downhill from there. So hey, you know, teams are going to have their ebbs and flows. They are a massive club in the world. They will bounce back eventually, probably even faster than Man United will bounce back, and that's been a while. So nothing to worry about if I'm a Bayern fan. Not sure if there's many of those in Canada, but um, yeah, I think they'll bounce back eventually. And again, we'll see them, later in the knockout stages. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, it's actually a great point that the comparison between sort of the recruitment that Bayern have had more recently, where we know, of course, we know them for being that the big dogs in the Bundesliga, basically picking off the best young players from the other teams, and bringing them through and making them stars. Whereas this time around, they faced a team with a bunch of teenagers who balled out and just kept the ball away from all of these big name stars. And of course, um, Michael Lise made the move this year, but Thomas Mueller, Harry Kane, Serge Gnabry, Joshua Kimmich, and then you had, of course, Leon Goretzka, Kingsley Coleman, Champions League winning goal scorer, Jamal Musiala. Those players couldn't really get anywhere near these new and up and coming Barca players. So it's I think that is a very kind of the story of the two teams really is told just by how this game played out. So just very interesting to see there. But yes, I think this covers the main games from this week's Champions League. We'll take a quick break here, guys, and then we'll be back covering some more of we'll actually be previewing some of the upcoming Premier League games, guys. So stay with us. Welcome back to Also Footy, guys. We're going to continue our podcast now, previewing some of the upcoming Premier League games taking place this weekend. And of course, there's a big one here, including Mac, you and I. Liverpool will be traveling to Arsenal and the Emirates Stadium. This one, of course, will be, I want to dub it as the match between the two challengers. Of course, Man City, the current champions. I still stand by the fact that they have the biggest chance of retaining their title. But of course, Liverpool and Arsenal have been closer. Of course, Arsenal in the last two seasons. So this will be a very much a big battle between these two to either create some more separation at the top for Liverpool in the Premier League, or for Arsenal to, of course, make up that ground and, of course, keep in pace with the top of the table. But Mac, this game, of course, we've had a lot of things happen over the last couple of days, and even from last week with some injuries, some suspensions, and just overall everything kind of leading up to this game makes it very much so the game of the weekend, I would say. What are your predictions for this upcoming game, Mac?
So, taking a look and seeing how the squads are currently constructed based on who's available, I find it hard to believe that Liverpool shouldn't come into this game confident. And I think Ray was talking about before the podcast, where they don't pick up a win. It's really much a missed opportunity. The odds actually, strangely enough, maybe it's because Arsenal playing at home, have odds on actually have Arsenal as the slight edge favorites. But when you're missing, I would argue 5 players who would have started. So that's Bukayo Saka, Odegaard, William Saliba, Calafiori, as well as Jurrien Timber. You're in, I would argue, a tough position right now if you are Arsenal. I would assume that you're going to start a midfield 3 of Partey, Declan Rice, and Mikel Merino, very similar to what you saw in the Bournemouth game. From that midfield, I don't see as much creativity to be able to really get at a Liverpool midfield, which I would argue can be defensively a little bit frail in certain positions, in certain areas, to which even a team like Chelsea was able to create enough opportunities to still threaten them. But from that Arsenal midfield, I don't know necessarily yet feel like you have the quality in the final third, as well as you haven't seen Raheem Sterling, who started the last game against Bournemouth, had to come off due to the red card, hasn't really hit the ground running. Martinelli, I think, has been Arsenal's best offensive player, in considering who's healthy, along with Kai Havertz. And even them at their best, I don't know if they're as much or enough of a threat. So I'm very curious to see on the offensive end how Arsenal are going to be able to create opportunities and how well they do. I think that's going to be the biggest deciding factor of this game, is how well Arsenal are able to are they going to sit back and allow Liverpool to control the game, or because they're playing at home, or Arsenal going to feel like they're more in a position where they want to go out and dominate and try to create more opportunities in the final third for, I would argue, probably the weakest team that will have to put out the season in all likelihood. So very interesting to see how this game comes out. For me, I do think Liverpool should be favorites going into this game, considering the losses due to Arsenal. But with it being at home, Arsenal, I think, have not lost 4 games in a row against Liverpool. I think beating Liverpool both times at the Emirates the last 2 seasons in the Premier League. So maybe you have a little bit of history there, but I think this is Liverpool's opportunity to kind of close, to open that gap and kind of solidify themselves as the challengers. And if the result doesn't go Arsenal's way, I think now they're going to be at the point where a lot of fans can start asking questions in terms of, okay, are we in the title race? What's wrong? Because considering how much has been invested in the squad, and at this point, if they do lose this game, I think they'll be 7 points off the drift, which is quite a lot to start the season already. So very excited for this game. There's a lot riding on it. But like I said, I think Liverpool should be the slight favorites going into it.
Yeah, I think. Well, I know that of course Saliba will be out. Odegaard longer term injury. Calafiori, Timber have picked up injuries as well. But there is, I think, from what I'm reading, there's a slight chance that Saka might play. So that is I guess, a positive. But like I do agree, the fact remains is this is a very depleted Arsenal squad. Liverpool have small injuries here and there, but of course, coming off the back of both teams actually won in the Champions League 1-0 this past week, they should feel confident in getting the win here. Gio, you called it, I guess, a couple podcasts ago, singling out Liverpool as your title favorites. Is this the opportunity for them to sort of make that statement here? Of course, the whole narrative was Liverpool haven't faced a strong a challenge so far, and this I think is the biggest challenge up to Arne Slot's start of the season. What do you think?
I mean, obviously, last week the win against Chelsea was big. Seeing as how Chelsea's been, on a quite decent form. To be fair, but yeah, I think absolutely this is their chance because again, we stressed about, or at least I stressed about, Liverpool's depth and whether or not Arne Slot will be more active because he wasn't as active over the summer window in the winter window. Because they're gonna need depth if they want to be successful or continue to be successful in multiple competitions and you know while they are healthy, while they have their main pieces to the puzzle, I think they really have to go out there and really get the win. Not even a draw. Obviously, don't force it if it's not there, but they really have to go for this win. Again, like Mac mentioned, this could arguably be one of the weaker sides that Arsenal puts out this season. And, you know, Liverpool, this core has, they've gone through a couple of tougher seasons, but have remained in the talks um of being in the top three, being in the top four, have put themselves in great positions to win. So they are comfortable with this group. They know what each player kind of brings to the table. It's not going to be a shocker to anyone. So I think they're well prepared in terms of what they expect from Arsenal. Kind of figuring out what tactics, Mikel Arteta may kind of throw at them. But I think for the most part, if I'm Arnie Slot, I'm taking this as a clear advantage, and I am looking at a win and 3 points, no more, no less.
Yeah, on that, I guess I'll let you cook, Mac, but I just want to pose a question if you're going there. What are some of the areas of the pitch that we might see some joy for both Arsenal and Liverpool?
So to start off, I think was trending on Twitter as soon as Calafiori got injured was Zinchenko. So if he's starting at left fullback for Arsenal, I think that's an area of the pitch that Mohamed Salah is going to. He's licking his lips right now in excitement if that's the case. Where you're probably seeing a back four of Ben White, Gabriel, Kivior, and Zinchenko. That's a area of a concern for Arsenal. Defensively, you are going to be sussed out across the pitch. So that's why maybe even more so Arsenal are going to be comfortable going in with the Partey, Rice, Miguel Moreno midfield three to allow that defensive support. So I think that's the area of the pitch. I think Liverpool both. If it'll be interesting to see how that back four lines up. Does Lewis Miles Skelly start at left back instead? I still think Salah would be very hungry to be able to get an opportunity to be able to get at that youngster as well. So I think offensively, Liverpool should have the space to be able to get in behind and create opportunities against a very, very much weakened Arsenal back four, because you still haven't even seen Tomiyasu play thus far this season for Arsenal, who would have been a like-for-like replacement. So I would argue you're missing four of Arsenal's top 7 defenders, realistically. So, sorry, 4 of top 6 defenders in all actuality. So I would be very concerned Arsenal defensively, and Liverpool, I think you're going to see a lot of joy from tackling that area of the pitch. On the other side of the coin, I think what's going to be interesting and what has done well for Arsenal is the matchup between Trent Alexander-Arnold and Martinelli. I would argue Martinelli's had much better games against Trent Alexander-Arnold, given his flexibility of tucking into the midfield to create opportunities, where Martinelli is, I would argue, one of the best defensive wingers in terms of the work rate that he puts in to deny opportunities for Trent to get on the offensive third and to get up into the pitch to be able to attack. So Trent really hasn't shown out against Arsenal historically, whereas Martinelli still has the pace to be able to get at Trent in that area of the pitch in between him and a Konate and cause problems there. So I think both defensively, you're going to have questions based off of availability for Arsenal and just based off scheme wise how Liverpool do set up with the right back. So I think those are the two areas that I'm looking at is who's better at exploiting that to get at their opposition, whereas who's able to make sure that they're defensively sound enough in those areas of the pitch not to cause too many problems. I think the last part and what's most underrated is that if Liverpool do come out of this game and pick up 3 points, this will actually be their second best start ever in a Premier League season. Second behind, of course, I think it's the 2019-20 season, which they went on to win the Premier League title. So I think that might be the biggest story takeaway if Liverpool do walk away is where, hey, they're just not maybe the challengers. Maybe they are the favorites, considering that start and having played against both a Chelsea and an Arsenal already this season. So again, those are the areas the pitch that I'm looking at in terms of who's going to be successful and why more so I do. Even if Martinelli does bag a goal, I would not be surprised if Salah scores 3 playing against Zinchenko. That would not be surprising whatsoever. So just given that availability, I think Liverpool are the favorites going in, and they have very much history teed up for themselves if they come out and take all 3 points.
Yeah, I think as well, it's interesting to point out the battles for Havertz and Darwin Nunez, because of course we know Diogo Jota is injured, so Darwin Nunez has been starting in his position. He did get a goal midweek, and it would be interesting to see what type of chaos both Havertz and Nunez can create for the two defenses, the Arsenal and Liverpool defenses, because let's be honest, Darwin Nunez is going to be just a nuisance in this game, whereas Havertz is going to hopefully be for Arsenal an outlet for when there's a lot of pressure. You got to hit your target man to bring it down and then bring others into play. Whether that's Gabriel Jesus, who did start against I think it was Shakhtar this week in the Champions League, or if it's Raheem Sterling, former Liverpool player, of course, on the right hand side. We'll see what happens there. So very interesting to see. I think those areas of the pitch will be, I think, vital as well, considering you always want to have the whichever team you're rooting for, you want to have your defenders have as clean of a game as possible. And with these two sort of chaotic elements, we're going to definitely be in for a very interesting game to watch. Let's move our attention then, Gio, to another game taking place this week, and that is, of course, Chelsea will be at home to Newcastle. Chelsea just coming off of the loss against Liverpool in the weekend, but I think they did win midweek. I think Mudryk had quite a decent game midweek on day of recording, actually, in the Conference League. Newcastle, though, got that win against Brighton, which I think kind of came against what most people would have expected. This game, quite interesting. Of course, the two teams that might be battling it out for those European spots and even the top 4 positions. Gio, what are your predictions for this game?
I'm expecting Chelsea to come back with a vengeance. Obviously, if I'm Chelsea, I obviously feel a little hard done. Obviously, last week against Liverpool, definitely had the chances. Definitely the compete was there. Whenever you lose, off one goal and one goal being a penalty, it's a tough pill to swallow. Because there are things that could have prevented that from happening. So, if I'm Chelsea, I feel like that easily could have been a draw, and they easily could have, been, in the thick of things. We could have been talking this game a lot differently. Um, it could have been a draw. Then what does this week's matchup with Liverpool and Arsenal mean? Is it a little bit more pressure on Liverpool now, given their tough schedule? So I think Newcastle obviously struggled to score, and I think they've continued to show that. You know, um, do they give up a lot of chances because they are so forward in play? Absolutely. And is that going to be a tough look against a team that only likes to attack? Yeah, it's gonna be it might be a very long game for Newcastle because Cole Palmer loves to shoot and loves to shoot from anywhere. Nicholas Jackson, again, another person who loves to shoot, shoots from anywhere. So I think they're gonna be in for a long one. I think it's gonna be a battle, but I think Chelsea do leg this one out, and it's gonna be a close one, but it's gonna end. I predict a 2-0 in favor of Chelsea, but it's gonna be a tough 2-0.
Very interesting. Sorry, I was mistaken. It was Brighton who actually beat Newcastle, even though Newcastle played quite well last time out in the Premier League. Mac, I think one area of the pitch that would be interesting is we, of course, talked about it last week out when Liverpool faced Chelsea, and that Chelsea midfield with Lavia and Caicedo playing quite well. They're going to be playing, of course, against the midfield of Tonali, Guimaraes, and Joe Linton in Newcastle, and so I think that's going to be an interesting one because we're gonna have to see if Chelsea can keep up that performance, or if they're gonna change things up and bring Enzo Fernandez in the midfield, and really I think this will dictate. Of course, we know Chelsea, like Gio said, are a lot more of a threat offensively, even though Isak just came back from Newcastle. It's going to be interesting to see how the chances are created from these two teams. And so, Mac, I guess throwing it to you, what do you predict will happen in this game?
So, for one, your first look at it is like Chelsea just played a game. Should the turnaround time, considering that they're playing again on Sunday, should they be rested? Are they worried about legs? Absolutely not, because not a player who started against Liverpool actually played a single minute in the Conference League, because just in terms of the wholesale changes. So the fact that they have that abundance and talent still come out and win 4-1 against Panathinaikos. I can't do that. I'm sorry, I'm not Greek. I apologize. But against the team in the Conference League, and you didn't have to kind of play any of your key players, I think is phenomenal. So as we talked about, where teams like Newcastle are going to have the benefit where they're only playing one game a week, the real Chelsea players are only playing one game a week at the moment, so they're completely refined and rested as well. So I think that's one thing to take away, where is a little bit underrated. They won't have that necessary concern in terms of the squad rotation. The other side of the coin, what I'm looking at in terms of the Newcastle side and this matchup between these two teams, it is a home and home in a lot of ways, because they're playing at Stamford Bridge in the Premier League, and then a couple days later they're playing in the EFL Cup at St. James's Park. So these teams are going to get very friendly with each other in a quite short time period. The difference, of course, would be is that probably Chelsea will throw a second lineup once again out for that cup competition, but who's to say? I think Gio highlighted, I do agree Chelsea should be the strong favorites. I think just looking on terms of the ability to score and create chances. In terms of thus far in the Premier League, only Southampton, Crystal Palace, Ipswich, and Manchester United have scored fewer goals than Newcastle. So you have a lot of questions of how effective in the final third Newcastle have been. Alexander Isak has missed plenty of games due to injury, and there's even the most recent talks where the contract situation between him and Newcastle have they've drifted apart and not really started to continue talk. Saying he still has 3 years on his contract, but that's drawn a lot of other interesting eyes. But the reliance on him, as well as Callum Wilson, and who's often injured just as well, it's put them in a position where this season, even though they aren't in the top half of the table, I think that they are quite fortunate to be there as currently constituted. So it'll be interesting to see how much of a threat they're able to pose against a Chelsea team, which defensively you should be able to get at. But against teams that you should be able to get at, like Brighton, they haven't really done it. So I'm very interested to see how well they turn out, how well they perform, because there are a lot of questions in the final third of how well they started the season. Whereas for Chelsea, I think the only teams that have scored more than them this season are Spurs and Manchester City. So I anticipate Chelsea to feel like they can kind of go guns a-blazing, go flying through, and to be able to create opportunities against a Newcastle team where even though they have been defensively strong, because of the fact that you're going to have so much of possession, you're going to get enough opportunities at the end of the day. And how well Brescia thus far has coached his team going in. And even though he did play a whole other team in the Conference League, it felt very much like the exact same system. So it seems like across the 30 players that could be in the squad any day, they're at least all on the same page for now. So I definitely think that Chelsea are going in as heavy favorites, should win this game. I'm actually more interested in what happens in the follow-up game of how series either of these two teams take that competition. Probably Newcastle a little bit more, but I to be honest, I think if you were to ask me, is this really? It's an interesting game from the fact that these are two big teams, and over the last couple of years, Newcastle have kind of shot above their weight. Chelsea have undershot. But considering what we've seen thus far this season, I'll be surprised if it's a very interesting game and Chelsea don't walk away with at least a convincing win.
Interesting. Yeah, because I'm just picturing now that you mentioned that. I'm looking at it now. The Chelsea starters that started the game against Liverpool are just at home. They train in separate pitches, like at the training facilities in Chelsea. They have like the main team and then the cup teams, and then they just don't interact with each other. And then when they want to have a scrimmage at the end of their practice, they just play each other, and then that's just how it is. But that's a good point. Bring that up, Mac. That of course, Gio, Newcastle and Chelsea will face off each other early, I think, next week as well in the EFL Cup. Do you think Newcastle, given the fact that they may not get all 3 points of this game, they might be a little bit reserved in the Premier League and kind of focus their attention on the cup match, where of course they most likely will have more success in the domestic cups rather than the Premier League? What do you think, Gio?
I think it's tough because you're gonna end up playing a Premier League side, and they haven't been playing well in the Premier League. They haven't been playing convincingly well in the Premier League, and that's very blatant. I guess it's a little harsh because we're comparing them to Newcastle's of late, and they are not that. So I think a lot of teams, a lot of people watching are a little hard on them. But you kind of put yourself in this position. You go out and sign the players that you want. You go out and play well. People are going to expect results. So I think, they're going to have to win this game, or they're going to have to try and win this game regardless of the fact, because if they want to make it deep in those competitions, they're going to have to play those big Premier League sides. And if you can't play them now, what makes you think that you're going to be able to play them later?
Yeah, it's, of course, winning is kind of the habit that they want to get into. And so, of course, we'll see if they were able to do it this weekend in our next podcast. But this concludes our podcast for today. If you guys like what you heard, please like and subscribe to us on our social medias. That's at @house_of_footy. If you have any comments, suggestions, or general banter, get in touch with us via email as well. houseoffooty@hotmail.com is our email. The next time you hear from us will be Tuesday when we review this week's Premier League games. And until then, we'll catch you next week. Thank you, Mac, for joining us.
Peace out.
Thank you, Gio.
Have a good night, folks.
See you guys soon.